Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 6th of May. Well, we started with our little DOC spread that started, well, right about here. And we've had a little up movement because of the reset from the steel coming across, but we've noticed a continuation of the decay in the daily for the red DOC and a complete drop of the shakeout. And what we were talking about was once we went from, well, the red histogram, as you can see, well, it's like a magenta color, started right about there, and we were seeing these BKs, which was representing that we were seeing a break. That's what that really stands for. And you'll see it happen periodically throughout various readings, but what we're looking for was this continued cascade of the red DOC, now moving below zero, so we could see a little extenuation. Obviously, the open of futures, some people thought it was dramatic, but when you're talking about, 20, 15 points or even more, in this case, minus 50 on the ES, it's not quite as significant as it used to be when you were down at 1700. Still a decent move, but not quite at the same percentage levels before. And what happened was there was talk of the China trade in that, but the gap down, pretty decent there. We're getting below that 76 number, which is now critical because that sets up the 50% all the way down to 44, which would be certainly much more significant. And particularly if we break below, what we'll be looking for is any change in the histogram moving higher here from a shakeout standpoint and or reset. But right now we have gold below the well, let's see, gold's at 2.6 versus 425 for the blue. Anytime you're below that, you're not in a buy at all at this particular point, which is why we have that little magenta daily popping in right there. NASDAQ, a little bit stronger, had formed its little DOC spread, but it's just this continued reset of the DOC red, which is long-term buyers. It kind of faded, which is interesting, going right into where new fund money would just about be popping in at this particular time, so there was kind of a little float. This continued flatness in the euro, not a surprise, and it's well within the expected ranges that we had for it. And gold isn't really going to see any benefit yet, but we're seeing a little pop-up right here after having reset to test the lows, which then happened on much higher extreme histograms and not positive. So could actually see a little bit more activity from gold there. And I don't think outside the range. So here's what it looked like. Let me even shrink this a little bit because we ended up with a couple of short signals. It started, well, back over here intraday, and had their immediate resets. And so this was much higher from a DOC red standpoint, and we went with cyan underneath. This second setup, a little more interesting. Took that midway up in between there, started around the 45 plus range was the close, but a little bit better than that. Just waiting for the little moves to pop up and capture something in between, which left me a stop somewhere in the 52.5 range. It was interesting because we saw this spike up towards the end, but it was happening with DOC red not breaking back above that zero. And so this becomes that critical. Once you break below that zero, you've got that inherent weakness built into the setup, and then weren't expecting this massive step down in futures. Nonetheless, leaving it short from there. I closed out most of mine early on and just left 10 contracts going on from there. And we're still improving as it's building a little bit of a base coming down off the bottom. So we ended up with these X's coming in on the rising. Red DOC is just not creating a significant enough boost just yet. We started to see the red and continuing to climb into positive territory, but right at that even point, and that's always a concern when you get the shakeout, just barely going positive and then moving back negative. And right now we're just about to have that Azure reach the gold, which will be critical because that would suggest better potential for a breakdown if that continues to have weak signals, particularly if the DOC red continues to fall and break down from there. So interesting setup from that one. Felt and this is something you can look for when you're looking at a short situation like that, where you're above the zero and you break down below. The key is if it doesn't come back above, even if you get price movement that might be slightly against you, you'd be thinking, why isn't it responding to that? Sometimes you have to give it a little bit of time to let it do, because the algorithms are giving us a heads up as to where the direction is going with this kind of a breakdown, as opposed to what price is doing. And that's where I always say sometimes price can be a little deceptive to what actually takes place. And of course, some people will say it's all news related, blah, 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 and fine, but it didn't change the fact that you could see that there was selling going on within this end of day false pump on Friday, which is why I was fine with leaving it where it was. Needless to say, that worked out quite well. But we talked about volatility jumping, and this is exactly what that looks like. And it's not a coincidence, because we knew that that was where things were headed, and obviously this gives a big discount to all that new money that's available. And when you're talking about something as much as just words, it can change really quick. So we'll see if there's a more sustained liquidation, because this is going to cause a lot of people to be a little upside down. So I would expect that if we don't break back above that 29.16, you can look for us to retest down lower here from a 50K standpoint. That nice run, and of course this takes it off that, from that level. Not a shock with that configuration. But what I want you to really look forward to going into this kind of setup is, if you don't get red DOC back above, or at least near the zero, is this going to continue to just float in the lower section. We have the 2880 from a previous range, and then obviously the 2905 now becomes reactivated going forward there. So look for that one. I think that was interesting development to start it, and certainly fit beautifully within the expectation of amped up volatility going into the ranges from the early daily. You got to wonder when you look at that daily and you see the DOC spread and that break from what we had, this long continuation move. It's pretty much filled back all the way to well, not quite that positive extreme. We've got a little more range to go to get to this one all the way at 2860 range. So I would expect that definitely is within the possibilities, and that just puts you a little bit below the 61% from the Morganacci line. So keep that intact. I will put up any new and relevant setups, but that's what I'm going to be looking for in any cascade buildup or continued breakdown, in particular if we reach the lows and we have higher DOC red than this previous dip. That would be the first beginnings of turnarounds, because even within a down day, you're still going to have these pop-ups, and if you're still expressing the weakness, they become opportunities to short at these key Morganacci levels as well, particularly if the readings support that kind of breakdown. Until you get a steel reset coming back below, we're still within that general short pattern. As always, though, I will update things as they pop up. Trade well. We'll talk to you later.